6:06 at WPSL, the talk of the Treasure Coast. Time for the Quit Doc Coach's Corner. And, of course, you're in good hands tonight, folks, regarding your high school sports activity. We've got Coach John Messina, Fred Almeida, and on the line with us, Mike Thomas as well. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening, Cliff, and thank you. Hello to everybody out there. We're going to talk a little bit about high school basketball. We have Mike Thomas, who is at the Jensen Beach South Fork game, and I got Fred Almeida here. And since they're the experts on high school basketball, we'll let you guys give a preview of what you think the season's going to be. Mike, you're at the game now, right?
Yes, I am. I'm down at South Fork High School as right now the JV matchup is in its final minute. Looks like Jensen Beach JV team is going to get a win here. And then the varsity squads will go out there for a big district matchup here in, District 13 7A.
Right. On that, and you've seen a bunch of games. Fred, you've seen a bunch of games this year?
Yeah, I've seen mostly the 8A games with Central, Vero, Centennial. Saw John Carroll play, so some of those teams. So, Mike, on the 7A, who do you think is coming through that district?
Well, I've only seen South Fork out of this district, and they've struggled in the early part of this year. They had a win against Inlet Grove early on, and they've lost 5 in a row. They're 1-6 right now overall after a close loss to Lincoln Park last Friday. 40-39 was the final score there. And they're 0-1 in the district with a loss to O'Galley a couple of days ago. So, Jensen Beach right now is on top of the district. They've won their only game, and they got that win against Okeechobee, who, if I were just looking at records, I would say that Okeechobee would be the team to beat in this district because they are far and away have the most wins. They're 7-2 overall on the season. The next best team is Jensen Beach at 2-2. So Okeechobee's getting it done, but they lost the one district game to Jensen Beach. The interesting thing it looks like here is that the teams, because there are so many teams in this district, instead of playing each other twice, it looks like they only play each other once. So Okeechobee's not going to be able to redeem themselves until the district tournament.
Now, I saw Okeechobee play last night, play Centennial. Centennial played an excellent game, but Okeechobee is athletic as can be. They ended up winning the game by 1 point, but it was back and forth for most of the games. So, I'm a little, surprised when I heard the Jensen Beach score because Okeechobee has beaten Martin County and Vero already in the season. So, right now I would say Okeechobee, just from what I saw last night, should be the favorite in that district.
Yeah, and I think it's a little too early for me to tell just because I haven't seen anybody outside of South Fork yet. This will be my first time seeing Jensen Beach. I think what I'm seeing with the game results certainly would indicate that Okeechobee would be the favorite here in this district, especially because it's not like football where the regular season's the only thing that matters. Everybody makes it into the district tournament, so you could lose every single district game during the regular season and still win the district tournament and be the district champion. It's just a matter of seeding and who you play in those first couple of rounds. I really like the quality of basketball, though, in the 8A district with Martin County, Central, Treasure Coast, Vero Beach, and Centennial. I've seen Martin County play twice this year, and I saw them play against Central, who beat them last week. And I haven't had a chance to see Treasure Coast yet. I haven't had a chance to see Vero or Centennial, but Martin County, of course, is a good team, and Central looked amazing.
Well, you'll find a lot of what's going on in that district tonight because Centennial's playing at Treasure Coast tonight. So we'll get an idea where that's at. I've seen Vero play, and Treasure Coast beat Vero in a low-scoring game last week, 33-28. Vero was just getting back their football players, so they're trying to get their legs underneath them a little bit. You can tell their shooting was off. Chuck Lowendyke does a great job, so I think that after we get through the holidays, when we really get cranked up in January, you'll see Vero starting to play, or not even play better, just shoot better. Their shooting was off. And then again, you'll find a lot what goes on tonight, depending on the Centennial Treasure Coast game.
And you also saw Sebastian River play last week, and they're very athletic.
Yeah, Vero and Sebastian River were a lot alike. Both teams had football players. The Parks kid for the Sharks, is very good shooting the ball. That was a double overtime game at Centennial that Centennial ended up losing, but it was just a great high school game. But again, Sebastian River has got a lot of really good athletes, and they got a lot of kids back this year, a lot of experience.
You know what they were talking on TV? I was watching women's college basketball the other night. I saw Connecticut play, and they're just something else. And they were talking about they wish that the high schools would go to a shot clock just to teach the kids to run the offense and do it. But, you know, Mike and Fred, we always talk about how feasible that is, not only expensive-wise, but you have to get somebody who knows what they're doing on the clock.
Well, Mike, you might want to speak to this. A lot of it has to do with the style of play of high school teams.
And I have to keep my point brief because it looks like we're going to be starting in just a couple of minutes here, the varsity game. But I'm torn on the idea of adding a shot clock because I think it would help make the games more interesting, and it could groom the players to play in college. But that's not really the goal of high school sports. You're not grooming players to go play at college. You're grooming them to be better adults and better human beings. The thing with keeping the shot clock out is you allow teams to kill clock. And instead of going, you know, they have the mercy rule where if a team's up 35 points, right, they'll go to a running clock in the second half. But being able to not worry about a shot clock and just kind of sit back and work the perimeter, it allows teams to get out of the game and allows them to close them off in the second half. It really adds another layer of strategy into the game. So it'd be a bummer to see that aspect go, but I do think overall it'd be more exciting. But the drawbacks to that, the cost associated with it, I don't think we'll see it here in Florida in any time soon.
Yeah, they were just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I don't see, as much as I would love it, I'd much rather see that money be spent to get the shot clock or the play clocks put in on the football fields as opposed to shot clocks added in on the basketball courts. But guys, unfortunately, they're going to start this varsity game here in just a couple of minutes. So I've got to bounce so I can connect over with our pals over at WSTU and get ready. So enjoy the rest of the show, guys, and we'll be catching up with you later.
Okay, Mike.
Okay,
thank
Mike.
you.
Getting back to the shot clock, Indian River, anybody seen Indian River State College play? They use the shot clock over there. And you're right, there's an added expense that is going to be involved in it, not only for the shot clock itself, but somebody to work the clock, which is kind of tricky if you've never done it. But I think high school sports with the shot clock would take the underdog gravely out of the game plan.
Yeah, I mean, they were mentioning it on TV, and they said what Mike was kind of leaning toward, that in order to groom the players, now these are coaches talking, in order to groom the players better to play, because now it's an up-tempo game. You remember before they had the shot clock, right? When Dean Smith had the what did you call it, the 4, what was that?
Well, I've seen 8 games already this year, and somewhere in each one of those 8 games, whether it's the end of a quarter or end of the game, again, one of them was a double overtime, team held the ball for at least a minute, trying to work the clock or either working what their plays were, and it made the game exciting, even though the scores were in the 70s and 80s.
And the 70s and 80s, that's
for
pretty
high school,
good.
that's going good. Up and down, correct.
Now, in high school, do they have the rule where if you call a timeout, you're losing? Do you get the ball at half court? Say the other team scores a free throw. If you call a timeout, do you get it half court or it's still under your basket?
No, they still make it under the basket.
Okay, it's not like the pros,
correct?
Which is, I kind of think that's a little bit unfair. You call the timeout and you're getting, 3/4 of the court.
Well, the thing with the pros, with the 24-second clock, they just want to shoot the ball and get up and down the court.
They don't need a 24-second
They don't need a
clock.
I watched UCLA play on TV last week against Michigan, and again, they're using the 30-second clock. You never saw it go off, or not even close, and it was a great college game.
Yeah.
It ended up 102 to 80 something, and it was a great college game, exciting, and again, they never even used a clock.
And if you look at the pro games, I think the scoring's up a little bit. And you see, a few years you go back, if you scored 100 points, that was great. And now you don't see that many teams go under 100 points.
Well, even look at the college scores now. I mean, we talk all the time about the underdogs beating the big boys, I guess you can say. But those scores are not in the 40s and 50s. I know they do have a shot clock, but you're looking at scores, 80 to 75 on quote unquote an underdog beating somebody. So they're getting up and down the court.
And one of the reasons that we had mentioned that you see more upsets in college basketball than you do in any other sport is because you have the one and done for the real good teams, and they're really not cohesive playing together. And then you see some of these mid-majors or teams a little bit lower than that. And I don't mean lower by caliber of play, but they've been playing together 4 years because their players are not good enough to be drafted.
Well, you can even see it locally here in the high schools. When you have a team that's been together 2-3 years and they're senior laden, they don't make mistakes late in the game. So a lot of these games that I've seen this year are real close, but at the end of the game, you have one or two seniors that have been there a lot like the college. You have seniors and juniors, especially when you get into the NCAA tournament in March Madness. You'll see a lot of the seniors come through. They've been there before. They've made their mistakes, but now it's their time. And you get the one-and-done kids that maybe athletic-wise can do more, but they do make mistakes. And sometimes it drives the coaches crazy. You might not have as much talent, but, the senior-laden team wins.
I told you I watched that game. Fort Wayne upset Indiana, and I think Fort Wayne, which was a tremendous upset, is I think they're like 10-2 now, and one of the losses is to Notre Dame. That's going to be a team, if they don't win their conference, they got enough quality games that they're playing, like Monmouth did a year ago, but they got a signature win because I think Indiana could be a top 5 team.
Well, that's college basketball that they're going. Indiana, will play, even though I think it was a big dispute, they will play somebody close to their campus.
Yes.
A lot of schools in football don't want to do that, but in basketball, when you're playing 35, 38 games a year, you'll go on a limb and do that for alumni's sake sometimes. Unfortunately, you play somebody good like Fort Wayne, Indiana, and you have an upset, and it's magnified more. Not so much that Indiana took a chance and scheduled the game.
And I don't think it's going to hurt Indiana one bit.
No, they'll be fine.
They have some signature win. All right, just switching gears a little bit, I want to kind of do a wrap up of our high school football season. First of all, this Friday night at Port St. Lucie High School, they're going to have the Treasure Coast versus the Space Coast, which is their all-star football game. At 7 o'clock at Friday night at Port St. Lucie High School. So you're going to have all the high schools on the Treasure Coast from Indian River County, Okeechobee County, St. Lucie County, and Martin County play most of the schools up in the Space Coast. And it's an excellent game. It's been at Vero Beach probably the last 4 or 5 years. They kind of moved it to Port St. Lucie. Principal Del Campo gave them the okay. So hopefully that'll be a great game and showcase the talent in the area.
Well, what's good about the game is it gets a lot of exposure for a lot of the kids that I don't want to say were not recruited, but maybe off the radar because the Division I kids, the big-time kids, their live period ended last night.
Right.
So now coaches can get film on other kids, and this is like the non-Power 5 schools. So you have a lot of schools outside of the state of Florida that will get film on some kids, and you still have the spring to go. So it's a great way not only to have the two different counties play each other, but to get exposure for the players all across the country. And you know how great Florida football is.
Well, the coaches can come up and watch the game. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can. And again, they can't have any contact with the players, but it's just the idea that they can get some film.
And like we were kind of saying before the show, with Charlie Strong at South Florida, with Lane Kippen at FAU, with Butch Davis at FIU, and in the 3 big schools, Florida State, Florida, and U of M, I can't see any high school big-time recruits leaving the state now.
Well, what's amazing about those people that you mentioned, they've all won a national title, either as a player, assistant coach, or head coach. Plus, nationally, I think it's brought Florida high school football, not that they didn't have this reputation, but really into the forefront because they're saying Lane Kippen took a pay cut to come to FAU, and he didn't come money. He come to build something, get his reputation as a head coach back. But again, he's in a prime recruiting spot being in Boca.
Well, they had mentioned on ESPN today that out of the 750 top freshmen last year that went to Division One, almost 350 of them were from Florida, which is outrageous numbers. And schools like Louisville and West Virginia, which had a pipeline from the Florida kids, I think that's going to cut it off a little bit.
Well, I know one thing, it's going to make Florida college football even that much more exciting because now you have Butch Davis, who's, kind of a legend in Miami. Then you have Kippen, who's nationally known. Charlie Strong's been, in Florida. Then he went to Louisville in Texas. So he's a national name. And then you have the three major schools that are all national programs. So I think not only recruiting, but they're going to be playing each other.
Yes.
Like UM plays FAU next year, so you got that matchup. UM's also going to be playing FIU. So, you're going to have different teams play each other. I know Florida State does play USF occasionally every couple years. So that's going to be nice to see a marquee matchup with the coaches.
Just like the law of gravity, what goes up must come down. So somebody's going to have to come down a little bit, I would think. You can't have all 6 or 7 schools being up at the top there.
Well, the thing is, football drives your schools. And so all the schools we're mentioning are name brands, especially the big three, meaning Miami, Florida State, and Florida. But USF, FIU, FAU all have 35, 40,000 students on their campus. So they're trying to get into that next echelon, depending on what college football route they go. So, again, by hiring a name brand, I think it really gives a marquee brand name, just like basketball has brand names. Right. And that's right now nationally, Florida's getting a ton of exposure.
And if you're a high school football coach, it just made your job a lot easier getting your players into these schools. Because I really think, listen to Lane Kippen's press conference today. First thing he mentioned, what a great job the high school football coaches in Florida did. I mean, that's pretty smart on his behalf.
Well, you're going to be seeing it in the summer, the 7-on-7 camps and, when the different high schools go to different camps. Right. Now you're going to FAU camp, and you're going to meet Lane Kiffin. Yeah. You're going to go to FIU or see somebody at FIU, and you're going to see Butch Davis. Right. So it's just not the big schools. It's all the others. Then throw in, the satellite camps, Michigan coming down and Ohio State coming down. So you talk about a hotbed. It's just got a lot hotter in the state of Florida.
And especially in South Florida, as we were mentioning last week, out of the 8 classifications, South Florida had 7 teams in the finals, which is outrageous, out of the 8 throughout the state. And you had in 1A, Pahokee won. In 2A and 3A, Chaminade, Madonna, and Champagnat from Hialeah played good games, but they got defeated from Jacksonville. In 4A, Cocoa Beach ended up beating Bowles, and Cocoa Beach was a surprise upset winner over Booker T, who had won 4 state championships in a row. In 5A, American Heritage and Carroll City in 6A both beat undefeated teams. I think American Heritage beat Punta Verde, and Carroll City beat Lake Gibson. Carroll City won pretty easily, and both of those teams were undefeated. In 7A, St. Thomas won their 10th state title and 3rd in a row by defeating Venice, who was supposed to be excellent, and it was a running clock. St. Thomas played 5 playoff games. They had 5 running clocks. And in 8A, Southridge used to be a power in the 90s from South Miami, won the biggest classification by beating Dr. Phillips.
It's not only that they won those games, it's the players that they won them with. You're talking each school, because I know Southridge has at least 15 Division I players. They're all not going to go in the state of Florida. But when you get 15 from one team, that's, that tells you the talent that if you went to the state playoffs in Orlando that you were seeing. It's not only the teams themselves, but the talent. Throw in the fact that a lot of them have underclassmen that are already being recruited. And I mean sophomores, some freshmen that are down the road going to be top players in the country. So it's not only that they're winning, but they're winning with quality players that everybody wants.
Now, this is all going to change for next year with the transfer rule coming in, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and with the new playoff system. Now, with the new playoff system, there's good and there's, I don't know. That's the best question. That's the best answer I can give you with the I don't know, because you had a situation this year that they put in the newspaper that you're divided into clusters, and I think there's 8 areas that are in the clusters. Now, if you win your district, you're automatically in. So people are saying just win your district, but now the runner-up is not assured of going. It's based upon your strength of schedule, which could be kind of tricky, and I'm going to explain that in a minute.
Well, I think right now they're starting to make schedules for next year. Am I correct on the football ADs?
You should have your schedule done by the end of January.
Right.
But here's the tricky part. This year, Treasure Coast beat Fort Pierce Central in triple overtime, ended up at 6-3. Fort Pierce Central ended up at 6-3. But Treasure Coast, due to head-to-head win, was a runner-up, went to the playoffs, and beat Osceola, who was number 1 in the state. Really represented our area very well. Then they lost to Vero. Now, they said under the new playoff system, Fort Pierce Central would have been in, and Treasure Coast would not have been because strength of schedule. That's something that, boy, I would have yelled and screamed about that one.
Well, that's where the scheduling comes in. I was talking to a coach from Don and Dade this past week, and he's going to be playing Vero. And, him and Lenny are good friends, but it's still the idea that it helps his point system because he's in Dade County, so he's playing tough teams anyhow. But he wanted to get another game that will help his point system if he ends up in that situation where he's going to need the points, and that's why he scheduled a game for this upcoming year.
But now Lenny, always good. Vero's always good. Lenny does a great job up there. But how do we know, and that school's Dr. Kropp, if I'm not mistaken, how do we know Dr. Kropp's going to help Lenny? That's the thing. They might be good, but they might not.
Well, again, that's the guessing game in the
Sure.
scheduling part. I know there's some local teams here that want to schedule up, meaning go higher in classification games because they could use the points. Same thing, the teams that are in the higher classifications, do they want to play down a little bit? No offense to the teams, but it really doesn't help them in the point system. And when you're looking at the point system, that gets you into the playoffs or not, and we're all going to 10 games this year.
Right. So that's going to help St. Lucie County because with 9 games it would have been very difficult. But here's a scenario. Suppose you play somebody beginning of the year, and I'm just going to throw this out. Say Vero plays Palm Beach Lakes, and Vero beats Palm Beach Lakes in the week 4. And Palm Beach Lakes was 3-0, and Vero's saying, "Boy, we beat a 3-0 team." Now Palm Beach Lakes doesn't win the rest of the year. Okay. When Vero leaves that game, they think they got a big win. Now, the other point is nobody, and I don't think even up at the state, is going to know who's in and who's out, except for your district winners, until they figure it out on a computer the Saturday before the first playoff game.
Well, I'll give you a better one, not only point system, but rivalries. A lot of teams, the last games, and I'll give you one here, you got Westwood playing Central. That rivalry right there, because you have Central that's a higher classification than Westwood. So, you still want to play that game, but the bottom line is it going to help or hurt one of the other teams when you're looking at the big picture trying to get into the playoffs? So your rivalry games could be a little tricky also.
That and also, again, you just don't know what's going to get you in. I mean, the state is going to say, win your district and you don't have to worry about anything, And it's just that you're not going to know exactly. And to me, I always like that the 10th week you're done. Because I always felt that as an athletic director, I wanted to prepare my football game. If we were a home game, I had 2 weeks to get ready for that game. If I'm a road game, I'm getting the buses, I'm getting the meals, and you had 2 weeks. Now you're going to find out on a Saturday night, okay, right in the middle of college football season, okay, they're going to have a selection show, and you're probably going to have sponsors all over the place. And then they're going to tell you who you're playing, so you really don't have that much time to get ready.
Well, the only thing I hope doesn't happen, we just talked about South Florida football, so let's assume from Treasure Coast all the way down to Miami. You're going to have a lot more teams
Sure.
that are going to get in, that's going to bump a runner-up from somewhere else on classifications. I just hope statewide that doesn't turn off a lot of football fans because, the quality that you have down south might overcome those runner-up teams somewhere in the middle of the state not getting in.
Well, I know St. Thomas, who did not destroy people in their district. They destroyed everybody in the playoffs. Maybe that second place team that was in St. Thomas's district would have been separated from them and would have been on the other side of the bracket. And you can have a Dade state championship game, or a Broward or a Palm Beach Broward state championship
Well,
game.
the way I understand it, the reason why they did it is they wanted the quality teams in there. And we'll be talking college football in a minute,
Right.
and we'll get into that in a second. But I think they would rather have two powerhouses in the final game than have, quote unquote, like you said, St. Thomas is winning the state playoffs by a running clock. It's not the quality I think that they want on the ultimate championship. Makes it tougher when you win it. I don't want to say you feel better about it, but it's a tough road to get there.
But if you had two Dade teams playing in Orlando, obviously that's going to cut down on your attendance tremendously. You're not going to get any local teams or anybody from up that area.
And again, that's what the state, I think, the first year or two's got to figure out. Are they going to take a revenue cut or not? But the games will be exciting, especially with all the Division I
the
talent.
games will be exciting on that.
Well, with that, we're going to take a little break right now. You're listening to Coach's Corner. WPSL and WSTU.
The Treasure Coast Car Guys know what you need to know about the car you're driving now and the next car you want to drive. Join the Treasure Coast Car Guys from Treasure Coast Lexus and Treasure Coast Toyota. Call into the program every Tuesday morning beginning at 11 or send questions to Treasure Coast Car Guys at TreasureCoastLexus.com. They'll explain leasing, purchasing, pre-owned, and all that technology we all need a little help with. The Treasure Coast Car Guys, Tuesday mornings at 11, here on WPSL and WSTU.
The Quit Talk Foundation of Martin County presents High School Sports 2017. The game of the week on WSTU features Jensen Beach at South Fork at 6:30. Mike Thomas has the call. High School Sports 2017 is brought to you by Treasure Coast Lexus of Fort Pierce, Treasure Coast Toyota of Stewart, Nice Air, the St. Lucie Draft House, Stimmel's of Stewart, Hoskins, Turco, Lloyd & Lloyd Attorneys, Colorado Pawn and Jewelry, proud supporters of the Martin County Tigers, and Bar Fusion of Port St. Lucie. Our Saturday morning programming is helpful and informative, beginning at 5 a.m. with Horsepower for an hour. Then at 6, it's the Florida Roundtable with Reagan Smith from the Florida News Network. At 7, listen to Official Access, our public affairs program. At 8, Mike's Boys host On the Road in Port St. Lucie, answering automotive questions for Mike's Car Clinic. At 9, buy, sell, and trade on the air. The spot where the money pours out, it's the Swap Shop. Followed at 10 by a Faster PC Radio hosted by Brian Longworth and a Faster PC for Less. At 11, it's IRSE Startup Talk with Tom Kindred. At noon, tune in for live weekend sports right here, Saturday afternoons, Hometown Saturday. On Digital 1590, because that's what we do on WPSL, and that's one of the many reasons why we are the talk of the Treasure Coast.
My smoking habit is killing me, and I must confess, I need to quit. When I have tobacco in my life, give me freedom. Tobacco, get out of my life.
Tobacco companies target me, a kid. They target us saying we will be cool, but really it makes you a smelly fool.
Tobacco, bye, bye, bye.
A message of the Shared Services Network of Martin County and the Drug Free Action Alliance.
Welcome back to Coach's Corner. Once again, here's John Messina and Fred Almeida.
Welcome everybody back, and we're going to talk a little bit about another new rule that goes into effect starting July 1st. We've been talking about it a little bit. The state legislature passed a bill last year signed by Governor Scott that high school students, is it just high school or all students?
Well, we just basically for high school. It's for all students, but really the impact will be for high schools
school.
primarily.
You can go to any school you want across county lines, okay? As long as you provide your own transportation. That's number one. That's the easy part. Number two is you got to have room. Now, this was not, and I'll emphasize this was not an athletic bill, it was an academic bill. But some of the state legislature has been trying to get this across as a athletic bill, and they kind of snuck it in one of the lines, and you couldn't veto it, so it's in. Now, the impact that it will have is, I really believe, the better teams are going to get much better. What do you think, Fred?
Well, first of all, every county has to have their own policy.
Right.
So St. Lucie has their own, Martin, Okeechobee, in Indian River. So everybody has their own policy on how they want to handle not only in county, but also out of county. I think when you're looking at Miami, Tampa, Orlando, the schools that have, like we talked before the show, 4 or 5 high schools that are within 15 miles of each other, that I think you're going to see more of an impact there. But the key is transportation, which wouldn't be a factor when you're 15 miles with all those schools, but availability in that particular school. And that's where the counties have to come up with their own system availability.
And also, hopefully, you got a lot of principals out there that are going to go by the book. And if the kid shows up at your doorstep and, hey, I'm 6'5", 320, all of a sudden, geez, I found some room for you, you know?
Well, the applications won't specifically say
Height
academic,
and weight?
height, weight, academics.
Or how fast you
Should,
throw.
yeah, it's basically I want in because I think school X is better than school Y, and is there room in school X? So that's the factor, but it could be interesting, especially where you're looking at some sports like, you know, basketball. 1 or 2 kids could change your program. It's a lot different than other sports where you need more people to create the winning atmosphere.
Right. I really believe it. Football, you're going to have to bring in a few and lose a few. But baseball, you bring in a pitcher. Basketball, you bring in a center. Soccer, you bring in, you know, a great goal scorer. It really changes
You got everything but names behind those people, huh?
I'm thinking it's going to happen. I mean, and I really don't think anybody can blame the FHSAA on this. They've been fighting this bill for years. They lost. They tried their best, but it's going to be a major change. Now, I don't fault any parent for trying to move their son or daughter for academic reasons.
Again, the bill was written for academics, so
Right.
we all understand that. The athletic part gets a little tricky because if you're a coach and a really good player comes in, does he ruin your continuity of what you have coming back? You know, your kids that have worked hard. A lot of times you're not going to know when these, you know, kids are assigned, maybe till the summer. You know,
Right.
it depends on each county's situation.
See, Lenny called in last week, and he mentioned that. He says, you know, Vero Beach is a community-based school. So that's great. And you know, their sports are fantastic. They go by the book. They got great sportsmanship. The kids are great academics. It's a great athletic program. But now you got, and it didn't happen yet. I don't know if it's going to happen, but you got 3 or 4 kids coming in, say, geez, now I'm a second baseman. You know, I'm a star guard. You know,
And they could be coming in from
anywhere.
Brevard. They could come in
Anywhere.
St. Lucie County, Okeechobee, as long as they have transportation. But again, does that ruin?
That's the question.
Yes, your continuity of your team. I don't want to say ruin it, but you know, it creates hard feelings. So I think that's a tricky part for the parent to decide, and also for the coaches to decide.
And I think once you go, and again, it hasn't been phased, once you go and you start somewhere, I don't think you can go back. You can go back to school, but I don't think you can go back and get your eligibility to play that sport.
Yeah, and I think that's how it works. Once you do it, you're there for
Right. So if you go for
that
football,
season.
you get in there, you get to school outside of your district. You play preseason in the fall. You play 3 or 4 games. Geez, I don't like this coach. I don't like this system. Can you go back to your regular school? Yes, for
I think
academics.
you can go back to your zone
not to
school.
play.
Correct, right. To
but
your
not
zone
to
play.
play.
Right.
Now, what happens with magnet schools? Are they involved too?
From what I understand, there is a policy for magnet school, and each district is going to have some type of policy.
So they can actually, with our district of Lincoln Park, they can actually have kids outside of the county go to Lincoln Park?
Correct, but there'll be a application process, and you know there'll be a process that they'll have in place to do that.
So this is going to be very interesting down the road. And Greg Wyatt had mentioned that he spoke to Superintendent Jen, and sometime in February, we're going to have a show on this. We're going to bring Fred on as a guidance counselor, some of the coaches on, and we're going to talk about this once we really get the nuts and bolts of what the rule is, because it is, if you look at the rule itself, if you look at the law itself, that's great. This is America. You should be able to go whatever school you want. But people are going to bend that rule immensely.
Well, again, you got schools. When you got more schools in proximity to each other, I think you're going to have a bigger headache than you are schools that are, I would say, spread out. But, like using Indian River, there's only two major, two schools in the high school other than a charter school. So, I think it could be tricky for the bigger schools. What's going to be interesting is when it all really starts in July, and you start hearing through the grapevine that this player went there and that, then our shows will be interesting in the fall.
So that the parents are going to say, well, if this kid's coming in, I'm going somewhere else. Well, I got to know if he comes in. But you know what's going to be key to the schools that live close to the county lines, okay? Because you couldn't hop counties, but there's so many high schools in Dade that are real close to Broward and vice versa. And now those kids, and some of them have been doing this for years. But
well, again, it's how you read the law, because if you just look at it, a parent thinks, well, I can go there. Yeah. It says I can go to any school. They miss the availability part. Then, like you said, if you're 6'6", 240, and you run a 44.5 40, okay, does that supersede some of the other things? So that's where the tricky part comes in. So I'm telling you, in the summertime, it could be interesting, especially when we talk about the fall football.
And I am so glad I'm not working a student assignment, and I guess you are too, right?
Well, they'll have rules and regulations, so I think it'll all be controlled.
You know what they need at student assignment? They're going to need a big waiting room, right? And they might need a few policemen
Mr.
outside.
Jen will tell us how it works in February.
We'll have them. All right, let's talk to something that's real close to you, is the college football. I know you're still, and I did the rant and raving for you about the playoffs, and Greg had to tell us, I told you so about Penn State, and he told us, right?
Well, the only thing about it is they want to take the personal part out of the system, with that committee. And when they had the 4 teams, we knew Alabama was in, and they won the SEC.
Easily.
Wait
a minute, they scored again now on Florida. I just want to let you know that.
Florida people don't like you now. I didn't say that. Then you have Washington that won the Pac-10 and had 1 loss.
Right.
Then you had Clemson that had 1 loss and won the ACC.
Okay, now we all agree.
Right. There's no problem.
There's no problem.
Now here's where it gets interesting.
Yes, it does.
Ohio State didn't win the Big Ten title.
They didn't win their conference.
Did they play in the title game?
No.
No. Okay.
Did they lose to the team that won?
But
yes.
Did they win? Did they win?
Did they win what?
They didn't even play for the conference title. Now, a couple years ago, their coach said when he got in and he actually won a national title that one of the criteria should be that you win your conference title. Now, naturally, he's not promoting that when this all happened. So I'm like everybody else. What does Wisconsin-Penn State game mean other than the fact that it's good for those 2 teams to win the Big Ten? And I think the committee locked themselves into Ohio State when they made them in that ranking, that second to the last ranking, second, because they weren't moving them from 2 to 5. So I think that was an indication that they locked them in and they thought that they were one of the better teams. Now, I know they want to get the 4 best teams, but there has to be some criteria that you either play or win your conference. That's my opinion. A lot of people have come out pro and con, and I just think that, if you're playing those division and conference titles, you got to play them for something.
And by not playing in a conference championship game, they're going into these bowl games really healthy.
Well, when we found out, I said to you.
Yes, you did.
I said, who got hurt on Ohio State this week? Well, they didn't play. Well, if Clemson's best player gets hurt, or if Alabama's best player got hurt, which they did lose 1, and if Washington's best player got hurt, let's say a marquee player, Ohio State's sitting back pretty. They never played. So, to me, that was an unfair advantage on that point. But that didn't, the committee said that they were one of the best teams. So I'm over it.
No, you're not. No, you're not. In the car on the way home, you're going to tell me how you really
I'm over it, but
I
do think there got to be
example.
criteria.
I was rooting for the service academies all year, and Navy had a great year. They beat Houston. They beat Memphis. They beat Notre Dame. They win their side of AAA conference, American conference. They have to play a good Temple team. They lose their quarterback, who's all world. They lose their 2 running backs and a linebacker. Now, they lose the game, which is bad enough. Then they got to play Army next week. They haven't lost to them in 14 years,
yeah.
and all 4 of those players don't play, and Army beats them. Nothing against Army. I thought they played a great game. But there's an example where you don't play. See, to me, and don't jump out of your seat, I'd like to go 8 teams, okay? You have your 5 conference championships and 3 wild cards. How's that sound?
Or go to 4 power conferences.
So you're going to go 16 in the conference.
16 in a conference.
Okay.
The 4 winners. You got 2 divisions.
So
18.
which conference are you going to get rid of? I know what
Well,
you're going to say already. It
well,
starts with 12,
They
right?
can consolidate however they want to do it. It's a big money sport. You can still keep your bowls, but it would give you your 4 best winners because you would have your champion. You'd have to win your championship.
Yeah.
And how could you argue they're the 4 best? So you might have, like basketball, somebody that maybe has 2 or 3 losses that out of the blue, you know how the March Madness is, and before they get in, that somebody's with 15 losses wins the division. I mean, wins the conference, and they're in.
Well,
that could happen in football.
One of the arguments I heard on TV, I almost laughed, is that, all right, they don't want these kids playing 16 games, and there was 2 reasons. One, it's 16 games, and 2, they're going to miss school. These games are being played over the holidays. That's number 1. Number 2, how many games do high schools play if you go away to state championship?
Yeah,
16.
16. Yeah.
Okay, and high school is in a shorter time period too. So that's something. Of course, the injury wise, I mean, I'd like to see them cut to 11 games and let everybody, do those 4 conferences, and maybe you can add, because you look at the conference that Navy and Houston and Temple and Memphis and South Florida, who's going to be a powerhouse. Charlie Strong's walking into a good deal over there. South Florida was 10-2, and nobody talks about them, But let's look at some of these bowl games, and let's first go to the playoff games, and we have, I guess, the Peach Bowl. How did the Peach Bowl get involved in that?
I don't know, but they're the marquee game.
They're the marquee game. All of a sudden, the Peach Bowl. They must know somebody.
Well, they're playing in the Georgia Dome,
Oh,
so you got
that's
you got a nice place. But when you say Peach Bowl, it's like what?
Let's take the Peach Bowl. Now it's a little geographical disparity here. We got Alabama and Washington going to Georgia.
Well, I understand that because Alabama's the 1 seed.
Right.
So they, it's like basketball.
Right.
They got the 4 divisions, so they gave them the closest area.
And they gave them, probably 90% of the seats, too.
Probably 90%.
Okay.
Well, you know how Alabama's, they're going to travel anyhow.
Right.
Now, I think that's going to be a really good game, and it's going to depend on how Washington can turn over the ball on Alabama. Don't discard the fact that Lane Kiffin is the coach at FAU, because I know he went back and he's working on, the offense and what have you. But, he's thinking, I'm the head coach at FAU.
Now, please, are you telling me that Nick Saban's going to allow him, as soon as he walked back tonight, he says, Lane, 3 letters you can't say, it's FAU, okay? It's all Alabama from now on. The one question I have is the quarterback from Washington, Browning, good quarterback, but he's sort of like a drop back. Alabama has had trouble with the multiple style quarterbacks, the run option quarterbacks, the Johnny Manziels, the Deshaun Watsons, the Chad Kelly from Mississippi. That's the only negative thing. I think Washington's receivers are superb.
Well, they have the Ross kid that's lights out running that can get up and down the field. I think defensively, Washington is in the top 5 in turnovers, or takeaways, I should say. So, Alabama's been prone to make some mistakes on offense, with that running quarterback and what have you, to keep it close. And what Washington has to do is make it a 4th quarter game. Because, then you're taking out the Alabama mystique, maybe the crowd, because we know Alabama's going to have a big crowd. So if Washington can get in that 4th quarter, create some turnovers, you never know what's going to happen, because Browning is an efficient quarterback, and Peterson has been there before with Boise State.
Right.
And he's going to have some wrinkles up his sleeve.
Right. So if Washington ends up winning, now here's what I think Saban's going to do. He's going to blame Kiffin and then says, guess what? We're scheduling you next year. So we'll beat you by 80.
That could happen.
That could happen. Okay, now the other game, the Fiesta Bowl, we have Ohio State and we have Clemson. So they're traveling about the same distance. And what do you think about that one?
You got 2 teams that are identical. They both have quarterbacks, although I think Clemson's quarterback throws the ball better. But they're both leaders. We were talking about basketball, about seniors. Both of those, Barrett and Watson have been there before. They're going to make plays. Both defensive lines are very good. I think the experience is a little more for Clemson because Ohio State has a lot of new kids. But I think you're looking at two teams that are mirroring each other. Ultimately, I think Watson's going to make more plays down the road. But, again, turnovers could enter into it. They're going to be close games.
So
Clemson's favored in one and Alabama in the other.
So these games are going to be played on New Year's Eve, which kind of a mistake in my opinion, but they're playing on the Saturday, New Year's Eve. And then on Sunday, they're going to have the NFL games. And then all the other bowls that we're going to talk about are mostly going to be played on Monday on January 2nd, which is kind of weird in a way. And a lot of these games are going to be on WPSL. Greg wanted me to throw that in there. But I think probably the biggest non-playoff game is going to be the Orange Bowl, where you have Michigan playing Florida State.
And I think here's an added dimension to that game. The L.A. Rams fired their coach.
Right.
And Harbaugh's from California. And you're going to hear his name mentioned. Now, unless he comes out and says, I'm not interested, I think that could be an X factor right there. But just on paper, the two teams playing, I thought Florida State at the end of the year was playing as well as anybody.
Yes, they were.
And, Dalvin Cook, I think, got slighted in the top 5 for the Heisman. So I think he's going to have a chip on his shoulder. Plus, Dalvin Cook is from Miami.
Yes, he is.
And so, he'll be the last home game. So you have that dimension in there. And again, just two teams that could be in your 8th scenario, could be 2 of the 8 that would be there. So that'll be an excellent game right there.
I would be very disappointed. And you always have the option to do what you want. But if Harbaugh left after recruiting all those kids and how he built up Michigan and went back to L.A., went back to the pro game, I always said last week, I was telling Greg, Tom Herman took the Texas job. That's great. But you can't wait until after you played Memphis and you got beat by Memphis in your last game, and you tell me that wasn't a distraction.
I just think he's got to come out and say, no, I'm not interested.
Before the game.
Somewhere down the road, because his name's already being mentioned, and, it just came out yesterday they got rid of.
Now, how about the P.J. Flack from Western Michigan, who's going to the Cotton Bowl and had the undefeated season?
I'm a little surprised he's still coaching Western Michigan.
Well, I was wrong. I thought there was going to be about 30 openings. There has only been 17 changes as now. Now, again, things might change after the bowl games, but there's really no place for him to go now. Temple filled their spot. I think the only opening is Cincinnati filled their spot.
The only thing I could think with a lot of these coaches, their buyouts, and I don't think his buyout's real high, but the schools don't want to buy him out, and maybe himself, he hasn't finished what he wanted, and his marquee job was not one of the ones that opened up. So, everybody has their own goals they want to aspire to. So, maybe it just wasn't his time, and that's why he's still there. But he had a heck of a year. He's got a couple kids that are going to get drafted high.
Yeah.
So he's got a nice program going, and he's in the Cotton Bowl.
Now he did beat Illinois on the road. He did beat Northwestern on the road. I don't know if his schedule is probably set, but, maybe they can manipulate a game against a big-time team next year. And they travel very well. Their championship game in Detroit, and I know it's close by, they had 46,000 people at that game, and I heard they're selling tickets at the Cotton Bowl. Unbelievable.
And they recruit Florida, this area, very well. Western Michigan has a bunch of kids from Florida and even in the tri-state area.
Right. And went there, the great sportscaster who passed away, John Saunders. He was a Western Michigan. He played hockey there, So what's another bowl game that's
all right, we might end it on this one, but the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all.
Right.
You got USC playing Penn State. Now, again, I went to Pitt, but I will give Penn State props because they won the Big Ten. Nobody, including, I think, Franklin, the head coach of Penn State, thought they would have the season. Mm-hmm. But them coming back against Wisconsin proved to me that, there's something in the future there. Mm-hmm. And then you throw in the USC. Again, we talked about the 8 teams, Florida State, Michigan, USC. They would be in those 8 because they're playing as well as anybody right now. Throw in the marquee of the Rose Bowl, throw in the marquee of USC being local and haven't been there for a while. I think that's going to be a great college football game in a great atmosphere.
And I think a lot of people forget about the job that Bill O'Brien did when he went into Penn State. I mean, you couldn't get any lower that school was with the sanctions and you know, the horrible things that happened off the football field. But, you know, Bill O'Brien did his thing for 2 or 3 years. Then he moved on to the pros. But he kept that whole program afloat. And, of course, Franklin did a great job going in. Another game is the Sugar Bowl, which we have kind of the extremes there. We have Oklahoma, who's playing very well down the stretch, playing Auburn, who has been kind of up and down all year.
Well, again, you got two running teams. So when you talk about two teams that mirror each other, they both run, you know, that spread offense. And Oklahoma's quarterback is coming back next year. So, you know, he's going to be throwing for 400-plus yards. And Auburn is a little inconsistent on offense, but when they get cranked up with their wideouts, you know, they're going to put some points up. So, you know, that's going to be a high-scoring game. Nobody plays defense in Oklahoma's conference. So.
Big 12, which is net 12. I don't know what they call it the Big 12. There's not 12 teams in. Okay, before our last bowl game, we're going to let you talk about the U playing West Virginia, right?
Well, here's what we got. We got West Virginia, which is going to travel well in Orlando, so they'll have a lot of people there. You got Miami, who's 8-4, won 4 in a row,
right? And
I can tell you right now, they're on the cusp. I say it every year.
Fred, you've been saying that for 20 years on the cusp. You've been saying that since Larry Coker
2002,
left.
yeah.
Larry Coker left, right?
Since the Orange
They're
Bowl.
on the cusp.
But you can see strides that Miami's playing. The key for Miami is going to be is Kaya coming back.
They're right.
Because I think that, you know.
What's your feeling on that?
I think he's coming back. I don't
Really?
think his status of he wants to be a first-round pick is what he thinks. Now, that's just my gut. Najahu, the tight end, is another one.
Yeah.
And I think that he might come back because his brother's going to be a freshman. They're trying to work that out. But anyhow, the game itself is really going to show where Miami is, because West Virginia is 10-2 and only lost to 2 teams, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and their defense was very good. So throw in the fact Miami's offense versus their defense. Miami is young. Throw in the factor of, you know, kind of quote-unquote local for Miami. I think you got a great game.
And that's big recruiting for West Virginia, right?
Exactly. They love Miami, too, as we talked about with all the other coaches
coming down before. Yeah. But, I mean, you know, that's a great way to kick off the bowl games. I mean, I got a kick out of, I watched the Division II game. I love watching North Dakota State in that little dome that they have with 25,000 people. And the benches are like 2 feet away from the crowd, you know. But anyhow, I want to thank everybody. Fred, I want to thank you. I want to thank Mike Thomas. We're not going to be on next week because of the Boca Bowl. So I want to wish everybody a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas out there. And we'll see you guys on the 27th.
You've been listening to the Quit Doc Coach's Corner on WPSL Port St. Lucie and WSTU Stewart.